Come on forward. We're glad you're here tonight. And I know that once you get to hear our guest speaker, you're going to be very, very glad that you came tonight. Just by way of a little bit of introduction here, we'd like to bring the program together. I'd like to start the evening with a prayer. So if y'all come on up this way, I'm going to ask Mark Walker to join us up here. Amos Elvis, if you'll also join us up here, because we're going to have you do the Pledge of Allegiance for us. And y'all are moving pretty slow tonight, aren't you? Y'all had a long day? My name is Bill Flynn. It's a real honor for me to be with you tonight. I'm a candidate for the United States Senate, but tonight I'm playing the part of the Master of Ceremonies and thrilled to be a part of this program that's on tonight. I'd like to open up the program, and if you would join us and just stand where you are. I'd like to begin with a prayer, and we've asked Mark Walker to deliver the prayer for us. Mr. Walker, if you please come up.
Thank you, Bill. Anytime I follow Bill, all of a sudden I start talking lower. So will you? That's just a magical gift you have. Let's pray together. Father God, we come to you tonight. We're assembling in your house, but we are concerned about our country. And Lord, there are things tonight that we need to be paying attention to, things that are pulled back enough layers or evil at its core. So we ask tonight that we become more informed, not just to become more educated, but even making the application of what we can do to help our country and right the ship of where it needs to be. We thank you for these people who have taken time of their resources and time of their energy and their evening to be able to be more informed in moving forward. We thank you for this time tonight. May you be honored in all that's said and done. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
I do the pledge a little bit different than a lot of people do it. There is no comma after one nation. So you say it all together. If you don't want to do that, fine. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Amos. And if you all be seated, that's fine. As part of our program with our Tea Party event this evening, we like to recognize any who are veterans, either active service or military veterans. If that's you, would you please stand up and let us see where you are if you're a United States military veteran? Active service, too? We thank you very, very much. Another thing we'd briefly like to do, if you are an elected official in the room with us tonight, if you are an elected official, please stand up where you are so we can recognize you. Do we have any elected officials? Any? I don't see. Am I missing anybody? Okay. And if you are currently running for an elected office, if you'll just stand up right now and show us where you are. And we'll just go across the room. Okay. Your name and the position you're running for, please. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else that I've missed that's running for office? Hello, that's AJ. Good to see you. I didn't recognize you earlier. AJ Dowd is the 6th District GOP chairman in the back of the room, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you tonight. Happy birthday! You just celebrated one, and thank you, thank you. Anything that you need to tell the crowd before we begin? No, sir. Okay, good, good, good. It is a great honor for me to present to you the person you came out to hear tonight. Last night, he brought down the house in Charlotte at the meeting he was at there. I happened to see him in South Carolina. I was at the South Carolina Tea Party Saturday and Sunday, which was a great event. And if you missed it, you can see a lot of the videos that are captured online right now. And you can see people like Jan Morgan speaking, who we know from this area, and our own Joe Miyoki party, and several of the other speakers. But a really outstanding moment came when we heard from Trevor Loudon. Trevor has written a book, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. It's a powerful, powerful story about what you and I are facing and the realities in America today. But the powerful thing, and the thing that is really inspiring about the message I heard Trevor give in South Carolina at Myrtle Beach, was the inspiring tone that he brings. You and I are in a very deeply historic moment, and I think we all recognize that in this room. And unless you and I are the ones that turn this tide, America will be a very, very different place for the rest of our lives and for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm convinced, along with Mr. Loudon, that we are going to see these times, hundreds of years down the road, as defining moments for our country. And you and I, and the people that are part of this movement, to turn this tide away from socialism and away from communism, Marxism, and toward the free market and toward that American birthright, this is what will be reflected in our history books. And to articulate this in a way that really no American can, I guess, in the sense that you're from New Zealand, and I love to hear you talk, even if you weren't talking about important things. I want to have a really big, warm Rock Church welcome, and from all of this part of North Carolina, our speaker tonight, Trevor Loudon. Trevor, come on up, please.
Thank you, Bill. Can you hear me okay? Can you understand my southern accent? Okay. Right, look, thanks very much, Bill. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me here tonight. I'll give you both barrels tonight. I'll give you everything. Now, the first thing that everybody always asks me is why I should care about the United States. Now, I live 12,000 miles away on the bottom of the South Pacific. Well, there are two reasons. The first is simple gratitude that my country was saved in World War II, was saved in World War II by the huge sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers in the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that memory is strong in my country today. The second reason is related, but it's more selfish. You know, Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom fails in the United States, it fails everywhere. If you lose your constitution and your liberty and your economy and your ability to fund your military, the bad guys of this planet, and I'm talking Russia and China and Iran and Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela and North Korea and their crazy Islamic allies, will carve up this planet amongst themselves. There will be nowhere left to run. I get people all the time emailing me and saying, look, if things turn bad here, can I come and live in New Zealand? I could start an immigration consultancy, I reckon. And I say, look, come down for a holiday, you'll love it. It's a wonderful place. But it isn't a refuge. Nowhere is. You know, just a few hundred miles to the north of my country lie the beautiful Fijian Islands. China is now training the Fijian military. They're building big hydroelectric dams on the islands. Tonga is now on its way to becoming a Chinese client state. Just a few months ago, an Australian Minister of Defence was over in China for talks, and a top Chinese official publicly said to him, embarrassed him, said, now is the time for Australia to choose. Do you stay under American protection or do you come under Chinese protection? If you are smart, you will choose China because we are the growing power in the region. And all around the world, folks, your allies, from Israel to Germany to Britain to Canada to South Korea to Taiwan, Japan, Australia, they're all freaking out, all of them, because they look at the leadership coming out of your White House and they see that he seems to love the bad guys a lot more than he loves them. And that's causing a huge amount of instability. You know, Israel now has its back to the wall. Not a friend left in the region thanks to your president. And they may be forced to take desperate measures to defend themselves, and those measures could put us into World War III. Japan, which was never supposed to rearm after World War II, is now rearming. But can you blame them? Would you trust Obama to protect you from North Korea and China. So this is causing all sorts of changes all around the world. Your allies are looking at Obama. One of the first things he did when he came to office was to take away the missile shield protecting Czechoslovakia and Poland. Those countries had struggled for years to get out of Moscow's grip, and Obama put them right back in it with the stroke of a pen. Then he abandoned Georgia. He's doing everything he can to destroy Israel. And your allies are looking at this saying, yeah, America's great to be allied to these days, isn't it? You saw what happened when Mr. Obama called for help to go into Syria recently. All your allies were lining up, weren't they? Just couldn't wait to get on board. One country, France, committed anything. I'm not saying they should have. You know, it was madness to go into Syria, but it just shows where American prestige has gone around the world. Vladimir Putin, the old KGB man who spent most of his career trying to destroy your country, is now regarded as more of a statesman on the world stage than the leader of the free world is. And that can lead to big trouble, people, because we've had a lot of peace for a long time because of Reagan's doctrine of peace through security. And that security is going out the window. And do you think we're going to keep the peace if it does? I think we'd be delusional, personally. Now, my book is, I've got 2 books on the market. I've actually run out of the Obama book. But my latest book, and that was 700 pages, folks, all about Obama and his Marxist ties, all documented. But I got real sick of lugging that around the country. It's pretty thick. You know, and I vowed that my next book would be smaller. But it's actually bigger. Because this one's The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the US Congress. And the deeper I dug, the more I found. Those bloody commies just kept on coming. And I couldn't leave out Mel Watt, could I? And then he went and left Congress. So I've got to leave him out of the next book. But what the book is about really is the 2 big secrets of modern communism. And the first secret is this, and I think they got it from the devil, because the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. What have the communists done in the last 20 years, folks? They don't exist, do they? Or if they do, they're no longer a threat. Who's worried about them these days? Certainly not the people who make your foreign policy or control your army and navy. The other big secret of communism, and that's very, very seldom written about. There's thousands of books about atom bomb spies and revolutionaries and Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and whatever. But the really big secret of communism is this. It is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party to take Moscow or Havana's or Beijing's policies back to their country, and by using the organizations under their control, turning those policies into the law of the land in your country. Now that's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Because, you know, like in America, there's probably less than 20,000 card-carrying communists. How could they possibly influence public policy in a country of more than 300 million people? It's a very small tail wagging a very big dog, isn't it? Okay, well, how they do it is this. The key to it is the labor unions. Now, you were very lucky in your country for a long time because your labor unions were controlled by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. But in 1995, there was a coup, a very important event, and I bet you've never heard of it. That was the year that Lane Kirkland was deposed as head of the AFL-CIO, and John Sweeney, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist organization, took over. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America took over the unions. And if you take over the unions, folks, you effectively take over the Democratic Party. Because there's hardly a Democrat at any level in this country, any elected Democrat, who does not owe his job to the unions. Forget out the vote for money, for manpower, for vote fraud, you name it. They rely on the unions. So if you're a communist and you control the unions and you set a policy and you make it Labour union policy and then the unions make it Democrat policy, you're effectively dictating the agenda of the Democratic Party. And that's what they do. There's hardly anything coming out of today's Democratic Party that does not originate with the Communist Party USA or Democratic Socialists of America. Nothing. Green jobs, normalization of relations with Cuba, comprehensive immigration reform, Obamacare, all of them go back to the communist movement. All of them. So, still a bit far-fetched, you know. Look, so how about some practical examples? I want to start with one from my country, New Zealand. Now, there might be some Navy people who remember this, but back in 1984, my country elected a socialist Labour government. And the very first thing they did was to enact legislation banning nuclear warships from our harbours. And as you guys were the only people ever sending nuclear warships into our harbours, that destroyed overnight the 25-year-old Australia-New Zealand United States military alliance, ANZUS. Killed it stone cold dead, and it's still dead today. So how come a pro-Western, pro-American country at the height of the Cold War, whose bacon had been saved by you only a generation before, how come we could basically spit in the face of our alliance with your country? Well, this is how it was done. A few years after that, I had the privilege over several months of interviewing a New Zealander who had infiltrated our local Communist Party for our security intelligence services, the equivalent of your FBI. He was a government spy inside the Communist Party. He worked his way up. In 1983, he was chosen with 3 other comrades, given the greatest honor any communist could enjoy. He was sent to Moscow to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in Leningradsky Prospect, the Lenin School. Now, this was not a small place, folks. This was 6,500 students at any one time. Many of them on 7-year courses, many of them with one-to-one tutelage. This was the training academy of the future world communist leadership. When Nelson Mandela got out of jail, did a big rally in Johannesburg, my friend watched the crowd, and there were 3 people behind Mandela that he had trained with in Moscow. 3 of them. There were 200 South Africans at any one time, all on 7-year courses, because South Africa was so important because it controlled the Cape of Good Hope and a huge amount of mineral resources. Mandela himself was a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of South Africa. Now, these people in Moscow, what they were doing was training, obviously. They were training in Russian history to build loyalty to Moscow, trade union agitation, racial agitation, and espionage techniques. But the most important thing they were training in was how to take Moscow's policies back to their home country, and by using the labor unions and the churches and the peace movement to turn Moscow's policies into the law of the land in their country. And they did this countless times all over the Western world and the Third World. They wrote the laws of France and Germany and Sweden and Italy and Canada all over. Now, this was the time of the massive anti-nuclear marches through Europe. hundreds of thousands of people every weekend walking through Rome and Berlin, ban the bomb, disband NATO, get America out of Europe. And of course, the Soviets were funding and directing these peace movements because they wanted to destroy NATO, to give them control of Europe. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which you guys are the linchpin of. And believe me, people, in 1983, just like in 2014, your military and your military alliances are Moscow's #1 target. Because they know that if they can take out your military, Moscow and their Chinese and Iranian friends can do what they damn well please. Nobody can hold them back. That's why Mr. Putin, despite this little spat over Syria, loves Mr. Obama. Because Obama has done more to gut your military than most standing armies could ever hope to achieve. The most significant thing that Obama, who has worked with pro-Soviet Marxists his entire career, the most significant thing Obama said in his entire first term of office was when he was in South Korea, off mic, so he thought, talking to Mr. Medvedev, then the Russian president. When I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Medvedev says, yes, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. Darn right he's with them. Absolutely he is. Because if they can take out your military, folks, they run the world. And their man, Mr. Obama, is doing just that every single day. Now, so the Soviets had this game going on in Europe. They wanted to destroy NATO. But they're subtle, they're chess players. So they were thinking, well, how about we take away another country outside of Europe, out of the Western Alliance, and use the propaganda value of that to spur on the destruction of NATO. So they picked on New Zealand, because we're small, liberal, progressive, and we have a bit of a small countries thing about we think we punch above our weight on the world stage. We think people really listen to us. So they thought, well, we want to get New Zealand out of ANZUS. Now, how are we going to sell this to the Kiwis? Because they love America. So we can't play the anti-American card like we would in Latin America. This has got to be different. And when I say sell, I'm not exaggerating. If you think American corporations are great at marketing, you want to see what the Russians can do. When they target a country or even a state, they know your religious makeup, they know your economic makeup, they know your cultural background, they know the economy, they know the sporting culture, they know everything about you. They would know more about South Carolina than most North Carolinians would. So they bring in their experts. So they brought in all their experts, their sociologists, their psychologists, their historians, their theoreticians. They thought, how are we going to sell New Zealand on leaving ANZUS? So they thought, well, this has really got to be something patriotic New Zealand. This has got to be New Zealand standing up, something that plays to New Zealand's ego. So they came up with a bunch of slogans. This was going to be New Zealanders standing against the nuclear arms race, Kiwis standing up for peace, New Zealanders striking an independent foreign policy course, not a whiff of anti-Americanism. So these 4 delegates, including my friend, went back to New Zealand. They held secret meetings with the labour unions, which they controlled, the peace movement, which they controlled, and the Labour Party, which they'd heavily infiltrated. They mounted a public campaign. Let's get out of the nuclear arms race. Let's get dirty nukes out of our harbours. And in 6 months, legislation was in front of our parliament. It was signed off, and the ANZUS alliance was dead. And I'll tell you, now that you know the real southern accent, okay, next time you talk to a New Zealander, say, what about that anti-nuclear thing back in the 80s? I heard that was pretty cool. And I guarantee you, most of them, even conservatives, will puff out their chest with pride. They say, yeah, we did it. We stood up for peace. We stood against the arms race. They'll be so proud. And hardly one of them in 4 million people has any idea that those policies they so love were designed by the KGB at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning. A whole country was suckered, and is still suckered today. But could that happen in your country? Is it conceivable? Well, if I'd said that 10 years ago, what would you have said? Nah. And in the Bush era, whatever, you'd just laugh at that, wouldn't you? Well, I want to give some examples. Now, the first one I want to talk about, it's a small example, but I think it does great on some people. Are there any Vietnam veterans in the room? Thank you. I knew there would be. Now, I'll give a little story first, then I'll give the first example. Now, last year, the communist premier of Vietnam came to Washington to visit the president, had a little meeting. And Obama made a statement that caused a bit of controversy during that meeting. He said it's a well-known fact that Ho Chi Minh, Uncle Ho, who was the communist leader of Vietnam during the war, was a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence. Can you believe that? That's what he said. Now, the fact that he said that, there's a grain of truth in that, but the fact that he said that, and he was raised at the knee of a professional communist propagandist, Frank Marshall Davis, tells me where Obama's coming from. Now, the real story is this. During World War II, Ho Chi Minh, a 20-year veteran of the party, a Stalinist to the core, murdered thousands of his own countrymen, trained at the Lenin School, was leading his communist guerrillas against the Japanese invaders. And he was getting help from your American OSS, your Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of your CIA. Now, that organization was shot full of communists, because Wild Bill Donovan, the man who set it up, deliberately recruited veterans, American veterans of the Spanish Civil War, who were 80% communists, because he wanted people with European military experience. And those communists were never properly cleaned out. Your CIA was penetrated from day one. And also note, those communists fought as the Abraham Lincoln Brigades in Spain. Didn't fight as the Karl Marx Brigade or the Vladimir Lenin Brigade. The Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Just like the communists had an Abraham Lincoln School in Chicago, where Frank Marshall Davis taught, incidentally, and a Jefferson School in New York. They love to hide their revolution under your revolutionary icons. Do it all the time. Now, Uncle Ho, they got rid of the Japanese. The next step was to get rid of the French colonialists who came back after the war to reclaim their colony. Now, so Uncle Ho was thinking, well, the Americans helped me against the Japanese. I'm going to scam them into helping me against the French too. And he knew to do that. He knew that FDR didn't like the French very much, but he knew to get American support against the French, he would have to get American public opinion on his side. And he couldn't do that if people knew he was a communist and went around spouting off about Karl Marx and the dictatorship of the proletariat. But he might be able to do it if he went around the country talking about Thomas Jefferson and the glorious American Revolution, which is what he did. Did a big rally in downtown Hanoi, thousands of people, OSS officers all through the crowd. I am a huge Thomas Jefferson is my revolutionary idol. He is the model for the modern revolutionary. The American Declaration of Independence is a model for our Vietnamese revolution. All designed to suck in American public opinion. Fidel Castro did the same thing before he declared as a communist. Talked about the American Revolution and how much he loved it. But FDR died, and a real Democrat named Harry Truman became president. And he was nowhere near as stupid. Basically told Ho Chi Minh to get lost. Wouldn't have a bar of the communists. The Democrats were different in those days, folks. And it's just a pity that most modern Democrats don't realize they're no longer voting for Harry Truman or JFK, neither of whom would have a chance in the Democratic Party of today. So, just incidentally, Frank Marshall Davis used to write columns in his little communist paper in Hawaii calling Harry Truman a fascist, because Harry Truman opposed Stalin, so therefore he had to be a fascist. That was Frank Marshall Davis, the man who raised Mr. Obama. Now, the next step, Mr. Obama also made another statement during that meeting, which I thought was even more significant. He said that Americans are going to have to get on board with repairing the damage done during the Vietnam War. What he means is, you as taxpayers have to pay reparations to Vietnam for the damage your troops did with Agent Orange fighting that war. Now, I'm a bit old-fashioned, but I thought reparations were what the bad guys pay to the good guys. Isn't that how it goes? So why does your country have to pay reparations to an invading power who invaded the sovereign state of South Vietnam and did them huge damage? But your country has to pay the reparations, right? Now, there's a little communist group in your country called the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism. 300 members. It's a breakaway of the Communist Party USA. Its most famous member is Angela Davis. You know, the afro haircut, murder charges back in the 70s. Total communists. They are allied to Vietnam. That's their favorite communist country. And a few years ago, they set up the Agent Orange I've forgotten the name of the organization, sorry. The Agent Orange Responsibility Campaign. That's it. It's all written up in my book. And what they've done is they've gone around veterans groups and they've lobbied a whole bunch of congressmen and got a whole bunch of senators on board with their campaign. Tom Harkin, Jeff Merkley out of Washington. They got Sheila Jackson Lee, John Conyers. They've got all these people on board to lobby your Congress, and there's a bill pending still to get your government to pay reparations to Vietnam for the damage caused by Agent Orange. They've even brought a whole lot of delegations from Vietnam, including one with a little girl with no legs in a wheelchair, to sit in front of your congressman to basically make their hearts bleed on how much damage was done and how much you guys have to pay for that damage to fix it up. They even got the guy out of California who was mayor of San Diego till recently. The name has escaped me. What's his name? Bob Filner. Bob Filner, while he was a California congressman, the son of the head of the Pennsylvania Communist Party, by the way, while he was a California congressman, they sent him to Vietnam to negotiate these reparations. That trip was paid for by the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, an old Soviet front now run by the Cubans. A communist front paid a serving US congressman to go to communist Vietnam to negotiate reparations from your country to theirs. And I'll tell you straight, folks, those reparations won't even go, if they're passed, won't even go to their veterans. It's basically a scam by the Vietnamese communist government to get your money to do with what they want. How many people here know a Vietnam veteran who spent years trying to get some sort of compensation for the suffering he got from Agent Orange? Or their family? A few of you, right. How many years did they have to struggle, folks? For a pittance. I know people in my country, Australia and New Zealand, is the same. They struggled and struggled to get a pittance. Yet your president seems to think your taxpayers' money should go to Vietnam to pay for their veterans. And it won't even go to their veterans, it'll go directly to the Vietnamese Communist government. How do you feel about that one? That's happening right now, folks, and that's being engineered by less than 300 communists in this country right now. But how about a bigger example, one that a lot of you probably heard of if you've been keeping up with the news. It's called Obamacare. Heard of that one? Okay. Now look, I acknowledge that Obamacare is not yet fully socialised medicine or single payer. But who thinks that's not where it's going? Harry Reid's admitted it. Jan Schakowsky's admitted it. This is going to single payer because when it screws up, as the communists are already writing it's going to, they're going to blame the greedy doctors and the greedy insurance companies, and they're going to push for single payer. That's the plan. State-run Medicare, medicine. Now, the father of the single-payer healthcare movement in this country is a man called Quentin Young. Now, I'll just digress a little bit, because I come from a country that's had socialised healthcare my entire life. I'll tell you what, it sucks. Big time. Waiting lists, all the things you fear, death panels, all the things you fear, that's all part of it. Now, I'll just make a little point. Because I still get liberals say to me, look, you know, pre-existing conditions, you know, there's a lot of uninsured, you've got to give people a break, you know, it's only healthcare, it's not the whole economy. Well, the big thing they forget in this is the word quality. Now, is there a more important word than quality when it comes to your healthcare? They assume it's all going to be the same, right? Now, when you're in a free market healthcare system, and I know it's not free market here, but at least you've still got elements of it. When you're in a free market system, you are a customer, right? Your doctor views you as a customer and a friend because you pay for his holidays, folks. And he wants to keep you alive as long as he can. Well, you people in business here, how do you treat your customers? Like gold, right? They're your lifeblood. They're your friends, your allies, you love them. When you're in a socialised system, the budget is this big, right? But the needs are infinite. So therefore, if the budget's this big and the needs are infinite, what do you then become? You become a liability. Now, you people in business, how do you treat your liabilities? You eliminate them, don't you? You want to stay in business, you get them off the books. You get rid of them. Look, you talk about death panels. Why do you need death panels? You're a doctor in a hospital, right? You've got a fixed budget. You've got $1 million, say $10 million a year to spend on chemotherapy and your department. That's it. You've got a 75-year-old guy here with prostate cancer who needs $100,000 worth of treatment to maybe extend his life 3 or 4 years. You've got a 7-year-old girl here who's got leukemia and she needs $100,000 worth of treatment to maybe save her life. What are you going to do, folks? What would you do if you had a fixed budget and you could only treat one of them? What would you do? What would any humane person do? You don't need a death panel. Every doctor in the hospital becomes his own death panel because he's got to work in a fixed budget with an unlimited number of needs, and he's got a ration. We don't even think of death panels in my country. We know if you're old and no longer paying taxes and you're a useless eater, you are not going to get the same level of treatment as someone who's young and paying taxes and has their life before them. How can it work any other way? How, do the laws of economics not apply in America? Well, exactly, because he's conning you. He knows that's how it's going to be. That's the way they're going to solve the Social Security problem. It can only work that way. That's how it works in Europe. That's how it works in Australia and New Zealand and Canada, which is why Canadians come down here all the time. That's how it goes. Look, the father of the single-payer movement in this country is a man called Quentin Young. He's a doctor, former doctor out of Chicago. He's pushing 90 now. And in my darker moments, I often wish he'd gone to live in Britain or Canada 20 years ago, because he probably wouldn't be with us now. That man set up Physicians for a National... He's been working on it 50 years, folks. He's been the father of the single-payer movement. He set up Physicians for a National Health Plan, a whole bunch of other organisations, worked with the AMA, worked with the Canadian doctors. He's worked with John Conyers to get bills in front of your Congress on several occasions. But they've always failed. And it was only in 2009 with the Affordable Health Care Act that they finally started to make progress. And it's no surprise that the progress came under Mr. Obama, because for many years in Chicago, Quentin Young was Mr. Obama's personal physician, friend and mentor. He openly claims credit for indoctrinating Obama into socialized health care. Openly boasts about it. Says Obama was a big fan of single payer when he was an Illinois state senator and nobody paid any attention to him. Quentin Young was a 40-year veteran of the Communist Party USA. How patriotic he is, back in the early 70s, he and 4 other guys went to North Vietnam and tried to get into the country to aid the Vietnamese war effort, while those people were trying to kill people in this room now. That's Quentin Young for you. In the early 80s, he left the Communist Party and joined Democratic Socialists of America, your biggest Marxist group. And it's that group which is behind Obamacare. They've used their control of the AFL-CIO to push it. They've used their control of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which they set up and includes 80 members of your Congress, to push it. They've used all these medical organisations under their control to push it. They are responsible for it, 100%. And now in their publications, they're talking about when it fails, we go for single payer. They openly acknowledge it's going to fail. Now, to labour the point, just before the last election, the Obama campaign put out a little video designed to mock Mitt Romney. Because they said, hey Mitt, you know how you hate Obamacare? Well, guess what? The joke's on you. Because the man who designed Obamacare for us, John McDonough, former Massachusetts state legislator, Harvard academic, guess what, Mitt? He was the man who designed Romney Care too. So you're caught in a bind. And it's true, McDonough did design both systems. Mitt Romney got a system out of the Massachusetts state legislature, which is chock full of DSA supporters, and he tried to modify it and push it back and make it less socialist, but a compromise was reached and he got his name stuck on it. What the video didn't say is that John McDonough is the Massachusetts chair, or was the Massachusetts chair of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. So a Marxist, by their own admission, designed Obamacare. The same organisation pushed it, and another member of that organisation personally indoctrinated the president into it. 7,000 members they have, and they are on the verge of changing your country forever. Forever. Totally under the carpet. They cannot be allowed to get away with it at all. Because if they do, folks, your country will never be the same. Now, another example, one you'll all be familiar with, comprehensive immigration reform. Okay? Now, you're told by certain people in the Republican Party, like Lindsey Graham down south, and John McCain, and Marco Rubio, though he's backing off it a bit, you're told that this is going to be good for the GOP. Because if you can get these illegal immigrants citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to become loyal Republicans, right? They can't wait to vote GOP. Just like the 90% of the black population in this country have been voting Democrat for 50 years. They're all going to change in a hurry, right? And the 80% of the Jewish population in this country have been voting Democrat for more than 100 years. They're all going to change quick, aren't they? This is delusional, folks. But it's not actually delusional, because you notice the Republicans who are pushing this are the ones closest to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce has spent $1.7 billion in the last 10 years promoting amnesty. And why do they want it? Not hard to guess, is it? If you ran a big factory or a farm, you'd want a lot of cheap labour to run it, wouldn't you? That's all they're thinking of. Cheap labour to run their factories and farms, and damn the borders of this country, and damn your laws, and damn your national integrity. Because big business comes first, right? But the real drivers of this are the left. They've been pushing this for more than 50 years now. Started back in California in the 1950s. A man called Bert Corona, a leader of the Communist Party in Southern California, also a member of the Democrats. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs in the early 60s, the first organized effort to bring Latinos into the Democrats. He also set up a whole network of support groups for illegal immigrants through the entire American Southwest. They encouraged them to come over, got them jobs in the fields, got them green cards, and got them on the path to citizenship and voting rights. And was it because they humanitarians? Because they wanted to change the demographics of California. And they did. Corona also trained hundreds of people to do the same thing. 3 of them are very prominent today. One of them is Antonio Villagrosa, a Marxist, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. He made Los Angeles a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws. And the illegals flooded in, changed the entire demographics of the city and Southern California. Another one of his friends, also a Corona disciple, a man called Gil Cedillo, until recently a leader of the California State Senate. He got the DREAM, another Marxist, he got the DREAM Act pushed through a couple of years ago, which gave a whole bunch of rights to the children of illegal immigrants. The third member of this little group, and they're all close friends, work closely together, is another Marxist called Maria Elena Durazzo, the leader of the California AFL-CIO, most powerful woman in that state. She is behind the massive Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that have changed the entire voting patterns of Southern California. Signed up hundreds of thousands of Latinos, illegal immigrants, whatever, got them out voting, and turned California from a reddish purplish state to a solidly blue state. And why does that matter, folks? That matters because that is the most populous state in the Union, the one with the most electoral college votes. And that matters big time when it comes to presidential elections. And I'll go into that a bit more later. Deliberate program, 100% deliberate. Go to Arizona. There was a man who died in 2012, I would say was Arizona's most successful politician in decades. I bet you've never heard of him. A man called Lorenzo Torres. He was the head of the Communist Party USA's Latino Commission. And his job, much like Corona, was to set up illegal immigrant support networks from Texas to Nevada to Colorado, New Mexico, the whole lot. Also to campaign against any attempt to crack down on illegal immigration. He led the charge against SB 70 in Arizona a couple of years ago, and fortunately he lost that battle. Torres also set up a movement out of Tucson which has given you 3 Communist Party supporters in your House of Representatives. 3 of them. One of the reddest states in the Union has got 3 Communist Party supporters in their delegation. Raul Grijalva, no surprises there, Ed Pastor, and the freshman Kirsten Sinema. And all of them are profiled in my book. 3 communists out of that state all organized by Lorenzo Torres, all of them passionate advocates for amnesty. But the man who's really running things today, and I guarantee you've seen him on TV wearing his purple shirt in front of immigration rallies, is a man called Eliseo Medina, until very recently an executive vice president of the SEIU union, largest union in your country and the one with the biggest Latino membership. He's been driving this all the way, works closely with Grijalva, works very closely with Luis Gutierrez, the congressman from Illinois, who's been driving this through the House. Gutierrez, incidentally, is a former member of the pro-Cuban, Marxist-Leninist Puerto Rican Socialist Party. Medina has been lobbying, using his union members to lobby your GOP reps all over the country for the last several months to get them to put a bill through Congress. He is a former member of Obama's Latino Advisory Committee and a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America and a big-time supporter of the Communist Party USA. He's a Marxist, and he's leading it. And just to prove a little point again, which organization in this country 20 years ago was leading the charge against illegal immigration? Unions. They were constantly lobbying Congress to increase the penalties for any employer caught employing illegal aliens. The AFL-CIO was leading it. Today, because they saw that illegal immigrants were unfair competition for their members. They would drive wages and conditions out the bottom. Today, 2014, which organisation is leading the charge to get an immigration bill, to give amnesty and citizenship to the illegals? The unions. So why was it bad for union members then and good for them now? The fact that it isn't. Union members, legal aliens are real bad for union members, but they're great for socialist revolution. And as I told you, in 1995, the AFL-CIO was taken over by Democratic Socialists of America. At that point, it stopped being an organisation representing workers and became an organisation working for socialist revolution. And the man who got them to change the position, and it's not easy to get union members to vote against their own interests, was Eliseo Medina. He pushed it for years, and at their big conference in Louisiana, New Orleans, in 2000, he got them to reverse their position from anti-illegal immigrant to pro-illegal immigrant. He did it. And now he's trying to get it through your Congress now. Now, why does he want it, folks? You know, some people say, yeah, he wants more union members, and that's true. But the big deal is this. Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. I've got it on tape. I quote him in my book. He talked to the progressives and said, our movement, the number one priority for our movement is to get an immigration bill passed through Congress. We have to get citizenship and voting rights for our 11 million illegal immigrants. Probably 30 million, but he says 11 million. Then he went on to say, didn't mention compassion, didn't mention giving immigrants a break or reuniting families or helping the economy. All he said was this. In 2008, Latinos voted 70% for Obama and progressive candidates. If we give these people citizenship and voting rights, they will stand by our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. In other words, a Democratic Party, one-party state. Think about it, folks. If they get 8 million more votes, the Southwest goes blue. Even Georgia would go blue. Maybe your city, your state would go purple. But Texas would definitely go blue. And if you take the Electoral College votes from Texas, your second most populous state, and combine those with the Electoral College votes from California, which they've already got, that will make it mathematically impossible for the Republicans or any Conservative Party to ever win another presidential election. Ever. That's the math, folks. It's that simple. And that's what it's all about. Nothing more. And you have people in the GOP telling you this is good for your party, this is good for the country. They are traitors, folks. Whether they understand it or not, they are traitors to your country. And I urge all of you to go down to South Carolina and you help them to get rid of Lindsey Graham as soon as you can. Now, what the book is about really is I'll say something. Has anybody in this room, not counting the military, ever applied for a federal government job who's willing to admit it? Okay? Some of them are legitimate, that's fair enough. Did you have to get a security clearance, sir? Did the FBI check you out? Now, they can go through your underwear drawers sometimes. Your family background, right? Any dodgy uncles you might have had? Your education, foreign travel. Right. It's thorough, isn't it? And it should be, shouldn't it? You know, you might be in a position of trust. You might be guarding a nuclear facility, or the president, or you might be able to influence public policy, or have secrets, state secrets under your control. So they got to know about you, folks, because there are enemies out there who want to exploit your weaknesses. But what happens if you're a young radical and you've got a lot of union friends and communist friends, and they get you in a suit and tie, and they stand you for Congress, and you get elected, and you get put on the Homeland Security Committee, or the Intelligence Committee, or the Armed Services Committee, or the Agriculture Committee, or the Science and Technology Committee. How much security clearance do you need for that, people? Fat zero. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help them do it, right? How's that one working out for you? They're doing a good job, are they? Look, if you were a foreign intelligence agent, say Cuban, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, North Korean, Chinese, and you had a whole lot of communist friends in this country who controlled some unions and controlled the local Democrat Party in that area and had the ability to get one of their friends elected to Congress to influence public policy and find out any secrets he or she wanted, would you be doing your job if you didn't take advantage of that? That huge gap in American national security, one that you could drive an elephant through? Would you be doing your job if you didn't take advantage of that? I'll tell you straight, people, there's at least 100 members of your House of Representatives and probably 20 senators who couldn't get a basic security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither could your president. Could that be a bit of an issue? You got people like, Mel Watt used to hang around with Democratic Socialists of America, been down to Cuba a couple of times. Jim Clyburn, been down to Cuba so many times you lose count. The Congressional Black Caucus is basically an arm of Cuban foreign policy. They go down there all the time talking with the Castro brothers about how to influence your country to ease sanctions on Cuba. What did they used to call it when somebody went to an enemy country to work with them to change the policies in your country? Treason. Bit of a penalty for that, wasn't there? Happens all the time. Now, de Blasio, Mayor of New York, total communist, appointing all sorts of people to positions of power, basically telling them he's going to wind down the New York PD's ability to monitor terrorists. How many people are going to die because of that, folks? Could bring down your economy, a big attack in New York. But that's right now. You look, John Conyers, on the Judiciary Committee, head of it. 50-year history with the Communist Party. 50 years. Went to 30 years with Democratic Socialists of America. Went to their conferences last year. You know, Rosa DeLauro out of Connecticut, one of your biggest Democrats, most powerful. Personal friend with the head of the Connecticut Communist Party. Pictures in my book of her hugging her. Goes to their meetings all the time. And this woman, Joelle Fishman, is the daughter-in-law of a Soviet spy and the person delegated inside the Communist Party with liaising with the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, communist history. Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee, no surprises there. Raul Grijalva, Sheila Jackson Lee, Eddie Bernice Johnson, Danny Davis, Jan Schakowsky and Jerry Nadler have all been, while serving in Congress, card-carrying members of Democratic Socialists of America. Patty Murray out of Washington State, big-time connections to the Communist Party. Tammy Baldwin out of Wisconsin, freshman congressman, senator, long-time connections to a support network for the Colombian narco-terrorist guerrillas. You know, I could go on and on. Judy Chu, Chinese congressman out of California. Looks like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Beautiful haircut, lovely hair, goes to China all the time. Who remembers the Greensboro massacre just up the road here? 1979, 5 members of the Communist Workers' Party, a Maoist group, got into a gunfight with the KKK in the streets of Greensboro. 5 of them got shot, killed. Judy Chu used to hang around with the Communist Workers' Party. They were her friends. They had machine guns on the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina, 50 miles from here. And these people are in your Congress right now. And who do you think they're working for there, folks? For the Constitution and the American way? You can fix everything, people. You can fix education, your economy, whatever. But if you have people in your Congress and Senate working for the other side, where are you going to go? You know, that's got to be cleaned out, folks. Do you think the Russians would allow 100 pro-Americans into their Duma? Or the Chinese 100 pro-Americans into their whatever they call it? Do you think they'd be crazy enough? But that's what's happening here, people, right now, and in your state legislatures. But I don't want to depress you people with any of that, or bring you down in any way. Am I too late? Sorry about that. Look, you're Tea Party folk, you know. You're here because you can accept the truth. Because you're not prepared to accept the lies that everyone else accepts. And if you're going to fix this, you need to know the problem. You really do. No matter how unpalatable it is. Now, but the reason I'm here, you know, like, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'll be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. Okay? And believe me, folks, I'm not mocking prepping at all. Should all be doing it. But look, this is how I see it. In 2008, the left thought they had a slam dunk. They had the House, they had the Senate, they had their man in the White House. Their agenda was already written out, and they were going to steamroll Middle America out of existence once and for all. They were breaking out the vodka, folks. They really thought they had it in the bag. You know, and who was going to stop them? John Boehner? You know, were they going to be terrified of him? They had it. All those 60s revolutionaries who tried to bring you down in the 60s and failed because you're too dumb to accept socialism, who've been burrowing through your unions and your academia and your media and the Democratic Party for 40 years, their day had finally come. And they were getting ready to party. But in 2009 and 2010, something miraculous happened. Guess what that was, folks? You guys happened. You guys came out of nowhere, out of left field, or maybe right field. You took them by surprise, folks. You took me by surprise. Where did you come from? All you people got up and you stood on your Constitution and you marched and you blogged and you emailed and you agitated and you rallied and you got into that GOP and put some spine into it, and you, not them, took back the House in 2010. And you brought the agenda of the left to a grinding, screeching halt. They had it in the bag. They were going to push it all through. And you got up and stood up, come out of nowhere, and brought it to a halt. And some of you wonder why they hate you. Why they call you dirty names. Look, folks, you don't realize, might not realize that, but you saved your country. Because had you not done that, all of the left's agenda would be in now. Those illegals would be voting in 2016. Obamacare would be locked down now. And even worse, comprehensive immigration reform, all of it, green jobs, normalization of relations with Cuba, card check, cap and trade, all of it would be in now. And where the hell would you be then? So you may not see what you did, folks, but I'm looking from outside, and there are millions of people around this planet. We saw what you did. Because they were going to take you down, and us next. And you stood up, and you stopped them. And you're still stopping them today. That immigration bill would have gone through Congress this session if it hadn't been for you. If those Republicans hadn't been terrified of what you did to Marco Rubio, they would have put it through. You can absolutely guarantee it. I went to a progressive conference last year, Washington, D.C., Institute of Policy Studies. 50 years they've been going. Used to work with the KGB, now they work with the Cubans. The ideas factory of the Obama administration. And I paid $75 and put on my badge with my real name, me and Cliff Kincaid, and went there and mingled with the Marxists all day. Because I wanted to see what they were planning, what their priorities were, etc. And I got bored, folks. I got bored because all they talked about all day was Tea Party this, Tea Party that, Tea Party this. They took it off us, they did this. We got to stop the Tea Party. That's all they talked about. Endlessly. Because if you don't know your own strength, people, they do. They are terrified of you and your strength and your potential. Because they know there's only one force in this country that can stop their revolution, and that's you. They know that. You need to know that. Now, so you stopped that, but you did something even more important. Because you guys, you and Glenn Beck and Breitbart and all these people, what you did, you have kick-started the second American Revolution. Because there are more people in this country today who understand the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the separation of powers and all the things that make your country exceptional than at any time since the American Revolution. I've been to the bluest of the blue states. I have had audiences of 600 people in Michigan, 500 in Massachusetts. You go out of those big cities, folks, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who think just like you do, all over this country. And they're fighting back Common Core and Agenda 21. They're taking over school county commissions and school boards all over this country. They're getting into the GOP and taking their party back for real American values. All over this country. You look at the state legislatures around this country now, they have changed tremendously. And this is not a unitary state, no matter what the Democrats will tell you. This is a federation of independent states. And your efforts have enabled a whole bunch of states to give the finger to the federal government. Now, isn't that pretty cool? No? That is so important, because it's the states and local that's going to save this country. It really is. The base you are building now, the base you are building is so important. You know, you just need to know your own strength, people. You know, like, because I'm going to do something now that's pretty bad manners. And I'm giving you both barrels tonight, folks, I'll tell you. You know, if you get sick of it, tell me. But look, because it's pretty rude for a foreigner to come into your country and tell you how to do things, right? It's like going to your neighbour's house and telling them about their decor. You know? But I get asked all the time, because I see the Tea Party movement, the Conservatives, you've done so much. You're a bit burnt out. You know, you've had some losses. You know, you've been betrayed a few times. Where do we go now? What do we do next? And this is how I see things from outside. Now, as I've said, if they get immigration reform, it's going to be real hard to fight back from that. Real hard. So you've really got 2 election cycles to save this country. 2 election cycles. Now, you're faced with alternatives, you know. You can set up a third party. That's going to be real hard to organise in 2 years. And it's most likely going to do what Ross Perot did in '92. Divide the Conservative movement and give it to the Democrats. And your children live in slavery. Or you can give up on politics and hunt more ducks and catch more bass and play more bridge, or whatever you're into. And it'll feel real good, but your children will live in slavery. Or you can concentrate on local issues alone, which are very important, but if you neglect the big picture, your children will live in slavery. Now, to win, the first, you know, you got a 20-year road ahead of you to restore your country. But you got these big battles coming up. You got to win in 2014, and you got to win in 2016. There's only one political grouping that can win those elections. That is the Republican Party. Now, the key point is the character of that Republican Party. Because if they give you a Jeb Bush or a Chris Christie, you're most likely going to lose. And even if you win, you still lose. Progressivism just rolls on. But if you have a candidate, and I can't pick your candidates, but the front runner right now, if you had a man like, say, Ted Cruz, things could be real different. Now, but it takes more than, I want to go back in history a little bit, because I think this is illustrative. Back in 1976, sure nobody here remembers that, but you know. Back in 1976, your country had been losing freedoms, Democrat, Republican for years. Government was getting bigger and your rights were getting smaller. A man came out of California, Ronald Reagan, who wanted to change that. And he talked about the Constitution and defending America and restoring the economy and standing tall on the world stage and fighting communism. He stood for pretty much what you guys stood for. And hundreds of thousands of people loved his message and got behind him in droves. And they pushed him forward to get that 1976 Republican nomination. And what did the Republican old guard do, folks? The Rockefeller Republicans, what did they do? They hated him. They sabotaged him and criticized him and mocked him and opposed him every single step of the way. That sound familiar at all? No matter how many Reagan dinners they hold today, that was what they were doing then. That's historical fact. And they just pushed him out. Reagan just missed out on the nomination in 76. Gerald Ford got it. Gerald Ford went up against Mr. Carter. Jimmy Carter won the election. How did those Carter years work out for you guys? You know, interest rates up to here, gas lines round the corner, Iran, Panama, all the good things you can be proud of. It was tough, wasn't it? But the important thing is this: the grassroots did not give up. They came back in 1980 and they got behind Reagan again, more organized and more disciplined and more focused, and they pushed and they forced the GOP to give them their man. Forced them. Reagan got the nomination, took the country in a landslide, and those Rockefeller Republicans couldn't believe it. Took the country in a landslide, and what did he do for your country? Those hostages were freed the first day, folks. Defeated the Soviets, restored your economy, gave you faith back in your country. He couldn't do everything he wanted, but by God, he did a lot, did he not? Was there any better president that you remember? That's because you people like you ignored the hierarchy and got your man in. That's why that happened. Now, I'll just digress a little bit too, because we're always told, right, that, you know, we've got to get the young people on board. And it's real good to see a lot here tonight. But we've got to get the young people, and to do that, we've got to have trendy, cool candidates with great haircuts and liberal values, right? Because that's what the young want, isn't it? That's what they vote for and respond to, right? Look, I go around airports all the time and I wear my Reagan badge. I've had 16-year-old girls with crazy goth haircuts come up to me and say, "Wasn't he great?" How do you think I'd get on with a Gerald Ford badge? You know? Look, you look at that grumpy old man out of Texas, Ron Paul. Okay? He's cool and charismatic, right? Got a great haircut and, you know. Where's his fan base? The young people love him like a chocolate, right? The university, you know, and I don't agree with everything Ron Paul ever stood for, but the thing is, Ron Paul and Reagan stood for something. They believe in things, and they don't back down, and they're consistent. And the young people flocked to the cause. How many young people flocked to John McCain's cause? Or to Gerald Ford's cause? Young people love those who will fight the man. They love the underdog. They love people who stand for something. Is that right, guys? Absolutely it is. Now, to win the next election, you need every element of that old Reagan coalition plus. Because you got vote fraud, you got the media against you. I don't have to tell you what's against you, people. But you need every element of the base. Every element. You need those 1% of young libertarians who voted for Gary Johnson last time. You need the social conservatives and the fiscal conservatives and the defense conservatives and the moderate Republicans. You need those 2 million GOPers who stayed home last time. And I'll tell you who else you need. You need the 4 to 6 million evangelical Christians who don't vote. You need every single one of them to have a chance of winning. So this is what I would do if I was a man like Ted Cruz. I would want to get all of those people on my side early, before Chris Christie or Jeb Bush got up ahead of steam. And to do that, you look at all those groups, they all want something. Everybody's inspired by something, whether it's education or defense or fiscal policy or whatever, or energy. Everybody's turned on by something. I would say, right, I want to build this coalition now. I would go to a man like Alan West. I'd say, I want you on my VP ticket now. Okay? Then I would go to Rand Paul and say, I want the libertarians on board. I'm going to make you Secretary of the Treasury, and you can do what you damn well want to the IRS and the Federal Reserve. Carte blanche. Okay? And then I'd go to Sarah Palin and I'd say, I want the energy voters on board. I'm going to make you Secretary of Energy, and drill, baby, drill. Open it up. You know, John Bolton, Secretary of State. And you know who would be ambassador to the United Nations? No one. Okay? You go through. Dr. Ben Carson, Secretary of Health and Human Services. You know? Maybe Frank Gaffney, Secretary of Defence. You know, Mark Levin, Attorney General. You know, you're getting enthused. And for those Christians who care so much about the education of their children, who hate Common Core, I would go to them and say, you vote for me this time, folks. I'm going to make Dr. David Barton Secretary of Education. Now, would you get enthused by a ticket like that? Not putting all your eggs in one basket. You've got a whole team out there of people who understand what it's going to take to turn this country around. Would you get out of bed and campaign for that? Would you get your neighbours on board and put up yard signs and knock on doors and phone bank? If you knew that you could get those people into positions where they could actually turn your country around, is it possible, folks? Because, look, the base is there now. You've never had a bigger base of constitutional conservatives and libertarians who actually understand what's needed. And you've never had a bigger group of leaders out there who could actually do something and want to do something for your country. The base is there. The leaders are there. Unite the base with the leaders, and what a movement you could unite. You could set going. Is it possible? It's sure possible. But it's going to take work, folks. It isn't guaranteed, but it's feasible. But you've got to look. You're all burnt out. You know, you've done 5 years of this. Thankless, hard graft. But I'm asking for 3 more, because that's going to decide the fate of this country. 3 more years of hard work is going to decide whether America goes up or down. Now, if you work your butts off for 3 more years and get everybody you can aboard and give it your all, the very least I can promise you is the ability to look your children in the eye and say, I gave it everything. Is that worth something to you? And if you win, and you can win, what an amazing country you will give your children. Not just what you inherited, but something even better. Because this has got to go beyond what Reagan did, folks. This has got to be restoring your constitution and gutting your federal government and restoring your republic. That's what has to be done, and you all know that. And only you can do it. And you can do it. Because you have the strength to do it, folks. You've just got to stay the course and keep the faith and do it. Give it everything. Now, I know how tough it is. I'm not under no illusions. This is a hard task. I was up in Morristown, New Jersey, late last year. I went out to the encampment where your revolutionary troops camped in the winter of 1780. Harshest winter on record for years. 10,000 troops started the winter. 6,000 were there at the end. Desertion and death got rid of 4,000 of them. The officers were eating their own pet dogs to survive. The troops were looting the local farms. The farmers hated them. They were boiling up their own boots to eat the leather. But they stuck it out, and they fought on, and every winter wasn't much better. They did that for 7 or 8 years. For what? Do you think they had any understanding of the great country they were creating? Do you think that when those guys were freezing and starving in Morristown and Valley Forge and wherever they were being chased by the British, do you think they had any understanding of what they were really going to create? You know, when you're in the battle, folks, you can't see the big picture. You can't see the forest for the trees. Those guys cared about the next meal and not getting shot. But they persevered, they had great leadership, and they won a huge victory. A victory against all the odds. How can a bunch of farmers and blacksmiths and lawyers and fishermen and farm labourers how armed with flintlocks, how can they beat the greatest military empire the world had seen to that point? How could they do it? Also mentioned another group that was amongst them, the preachers. Bible in one hand, long rifle in the other. You got to know, folks, George Washington, he understood that his victory was miraculous. He understood that. And if you were a betting man, would you not have understood that too? Would you have bet on George Washington? Put your house on him? Folks, there's a favorite quote of mine from Goethe. If you are bold, powerful forces will come to your aid. They were bold people. The French came to help them, but you know there was a lot more powerful forces than that. Do those forces still exist today? If you are bold, will you be left abandoned? You know you will not be left abandoned. Things will happen that you cannot dream of now, but you have to be bold and you have to stay the course. Now, we can look at those people at that time and we can see their place in history. From our perspective, those guys freezing and starving in the snow, we can see what they achieved. You think they could? I doubt it. But we can see it from our perspective. But what about your place in history, folks? Where's your place? How about you looking 200 years ahead? Some young kid in this town, 200 years from now, will be standing in front of a civics class with all his mates around, all his friends around. He'll say, hey guys, guess what? You know, how we've studied history, we studied that Second American Revolution when a lot of people thought this country was done. And the patriots stood up and saved the Constitution and restored the Republic and gave us the liberty and prosperity we enjoy today. You know, we've all studied it, guys. Well, guess what? As a personal, I did some research into my family background, some genealogy. I found out that my great, 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 great grandma and granddaddy, they were in the North Carolina Tea Party. How about that? They were in the Stokes Tea. How about that? So that's your place in history, folks. That's where you stand. Isn't that a good place to be? So I just want to say to you folks, thank you so much for having me here tonight. But more than that, thank you for what you're doing for your country and my country and for liberty. So God bless America and God bless the Tea Party. Thank you very much.